Hi. The film I'll be talking about today is Paris, Texas. This film was directed by Wim Wenders and was released in 1984. This film stars Harry Dean Stanton, Nastassja Kinski, Dean Stockwell, and Hunter Carson. I actually literally just finished watching this film again for the fourth time. I don't really even know where to begin when talking about a film of this magnitude, of this quality. As I just said, I've seen it 4 times now. I did not expect once again to have this visceral of a reaction to this film. I was mainly watching it again to kind of brush up so I would have something to, so I'd be fresh and wouldn't miss anything. This film, each time I see it, it's almost like I'm seeing it for the first time. And it's a film that it gets inside your heart and it's almost like it melts your brain. And it is so original. And I think that you appreciate it, or at least I know I appreciate it more and more each time I watch it, because we're surrounded by films now that are anything but original. So when you watch this film is important to rewatch every so often to remind you, oh, sometimes films can be a work of art. When people are daring, when people have vision, when people tell stories that don't just follow a traditional played out narrative, meet cute, tie it up with a bow, and then you're out of there in an hour 30 and tell your friends about it and we'll see you later. This film has all the ingredients and they all came together perfectly. It was based off of a short story written by, hands down, my favorite playwright, Sam Shepard. And as I said, this film is unique. Sam Shepard's work is so unique. I have so many collections of all his short stories, Buried Child. Anything Sam Shepard has done, I've pretty much, if I've been able to find it, I get it. Because even if you might not like one of his particular stories, you might think, you're better for having read it. And even if you didn't enjoy it, you will at least be challenged by it. And more often than not, you'll find something that's both challenging and enjoyable. And both of those things are in short supply in this day and time. And this film captures his writing and transfers it so beautifully to the screen. That is so hard to do, to take someone's writer as celebrated a playwright as him and do it justice on the screen and not dilute it. And Wim Wenders and Sam Shepard together, that was one hell of a combo, I have to say. And Wim Wenders, he's a celebrated German filmmaker and also a great photographer. And it's so hard to believe that this wasn't even something planned. These two men came together on this project. And I think he had wanted to work with Sam Shepard in the past on something, and they had kind of batted it around, and then they settled on this. And you just can't imagine this film not existing, because it's one of those, you could honestly say the world of cinema is so much better off because it does exist. And I guess I've rambled on enough so far about how great it is. I'll now give you a little plot background. This film starts off with Harry Dean Stanton wandering aimlessly in the desert. And we hear the beautiful music, the guitar licks by Ry Cooder, who does the score for the film. If you don't know who Ry Cooder is, do yourself a favor and look into him. He is so talented and underappreciated. You'll be glad you did a deep dive on Ry Cooder. We hear the guitar. We see that vast desert. And then all of a sudden, we see this guy in a suit wearing a red hat with a beard. And it's Harry Dean Stanton. Harry Dean Stanton is not a traditionally handsome guy. He's not really a homely. His face is a character in and of itself. He's somebody, if you watched his work, he lived into his 90s, and yet when you go all the way back, you can't ever even tell what age he is. It's like he did not age. He's somebody who chain smoked until his last breath. He was a true original. And in a time where, so many people are, lip injections, having work done, their face pulled back, It's so refreshing to see an actor who embraced every line, that could see the beauty in the blemish, that would not have his hair dyed, that was put his unvarnished self out there with no apologies. And as we see him make his way across the desert, we notice he's got this water jug. And he slowly makes his way to what appears to be like a convenience store. And he gets in there and he goes for some, and then he just collapses. And it then cuts to him being on a doctor's table. And the doctor goes through his wallet and finds the number of somebody, because Harry Dean Stanton is not speaking. And he contacts his brother, Dean Stockwell, Walt, in the film. And we find out Walt has not heard from Travis, that's who Harry Dean Stanton plays in the film, for 4 years. He's just vanished. They don't know what happened to him. He tells his wife, somebody's found Travis. He's, in the desert somewhere in Texas. I got to go get him. And she goes, what are you talking? And we then find that Travis had a son who was being raised by his brother and the brother's wife in California. And he says, well, I got to go. And he's like, you just stay here with Hunter. That's their son. And I got to go see him. She says, what are we going to tell Hunter? He's like, I don't know, but, it's my brother. And they honestly had thought he was dead. And he shows up and pays off the doctor. The doctor's crooked and I'll give you his belongings for the right price, and basically kind of points him, saying he went off that way. And when Dean Stockwell finally makes contact with him, Walt, I should say, he gets his attention. Travis, you see Travis kind of turn and look. You can see it kind of registers like, oh. And he goes, Travis, what's going on? You look like 40 miles of rough road. He says nothing. But there's enough communication that Harry Dean Stanton does with the eyes that we do know that he knows who this is. And he kind of gets him over to the car and opens the passenger seat. But Travis won't sit up front. He's going to sit in the back. And as they drive along, he starts trying to pull something from him. And he's basically getting kind of frustrated because it's like, you're not speaking. We thought you were dead. What, 4 years and out of nowhere you're here? If you don't mind my asking, where the hell have you been and what happened? Nothing. And he even looks at him and says, we got a pretty long road ahead of us. It might help if you talked slightly. Nothing. Gets him to a hotel, looks at him, his shoes are worn, everything. He says, look, we'll get you cleaned up. I'll get you some shoes. And all that. He leaves, he comes back. Travis is gone again, has to go kind of track him down on the road. And he's starting to get frustrated with him, like, what is going on? I'm trying to help you. You're making this difficult. You vanish like this. You show up with no explanation, no nothing. We think you're dead, and you just kind of, and you're not even making this easy for me. You just, nothing. And it's about 30 minutes into the film before Travis even speaks. And the first thing he says is Paris. And his brother turns, Paris? What about Paris? And he just kind of says, have you ever been? And no. And his brother is thinking, he's talking about Paris, France. He's talking about Paris, Texas. And slowly he starts to get words out of him. And the next thing, they're in one of these kind of all-night diners that don't really exist anymore with the corporate America we live in today, where every restaurant is a chain. And part of the beauty of this film too is getting to see what America looked like in 1984, when it still had personality, when the hotels were like the Ranchero Inn and things like that, these kind of odd, quirky, offbeat places that each had their own personality, as opposed to a Ramada Inn, a Hilton, a Holiday Inn. Just local places still had a local flavor to them. And while they're at this diner, Walt calls home and says, he's finally starting to talk, and we'll be en route to come back here pretty soon. And he gets back in and he said, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. And while in the phone booth when he's talking, he says to his son, do you remember your dad? Because Hunter was 3 when Travis vanished. And Travis has been gone for 4 years. Well, when you're 3, that's over half that kid's life. So the memories he has are very vague. And he doesn't really say much over the phone. And then Walt's back in the diner and he says, look, I've kind of told them we're coming and they're expecting us. And he said, I'll go ahead and tell you, we've raised him as our own. And when we got him, he was 3, and we didn't ever think you were going to show up again. We couldn't find Jane, who is Travis's estranged wife. He said he shows up at our door. He didn't tell us who brought him. We couldn't find the mother. We couldn't find you. And we've raised him as best we know how so far. And we kind of see in Travis's eyes when he hears Jane that something is triggered in that moment. And we know that might have been the impetus for this 4-year vanishing, this sabbatical into the abyss that took place. But he doesn't really go any further. And then when they're traveling back to Los Angeles, Travis mentions about Paris, Texas again, that, well, he clarifies that the Paris he's talking about is Paris, Texas. And Walt's kind of like, Paris, Texas, why would that have any significance? And he said, I bought land there. You bought land, why would you, what would you do with it? And he says, Mom and Dad, that's where they first made love. And he said, I always felt that was where my beginning was. And we then find that's what he wanted with that piece of land. That's his origin story. That's where he kind of first became somewhat a part of this world in any real capacity, and what that meant to him. And once, he's communicating, he even says to him, if you don't mind telling me he goes back to it again, what happened? He didn't really get anything. And then they arrive at Walt's home, and we find out Walt is involved in billboards, the ones that go up on the road, painting them and designing them and things of that nature. And they get to the house, and he's welcomed by Walt's wife, who greets him very affectionately, grabs him and kisses him, and in a very warm and sincere way. And then we see Hunter, the little boy, watching this from the stairs, tentatively, and just kind of observing this stranger who he can kind of have very vague memories of at one time of being in his life. And the scene where they sort of turn and look at each other and give each other that brief acknowledgement is so beautifully acted by both. And there's a scene too where she's getting the bed ready for him. And Walt saw, he said, he's not going to sleep. She goes, well, he's got to sleep. And he said, he's not going to sleep. And when it shows that everybody in the house has gone to bed, we see him in the kitchen washing dishes. And then when morning arises, he's outside with binoculars, and he's just been watching airplanes till the sun came up. And she goes out and greets him, says, oh, you shined our shoes, and yeah, I've done all this kind of stuff. And we get the feeling that this guy, there's something inside of him that's a little different. He doesn't operate like most of us. And there was something that got broken that led to the 4-year hiatus sabbatical that has not been repaired as of yet. And that whatever journey he's been on, he is still very much damaged goods and is still learning how to live again. He then approaches Walt's wife and says, I wouldn't mind walking Hunter home from school one day. She goes, oh, that'd be great. Hunter wants no part of this. And the first day he attempts to, Hunter gets in the car with another kid and is brought home. And slowly, he goes to the maid who works for them and kind of says, what should a dad look like? And she helps him dress and do all this kind of stuff. And he slowly starts to build the trust with the boy. And he starts to warm up to him. And he's starting to develop a relationship and maybe rebuild what had been broken. And there's a scene where they walk home together, and it's kind of cute. And you kind of see they're starting to not just get comfortable, but starting to remember what they loved about each other and that they really did have something at one time. And they're at the table having dinner, and Walt says, he said to Travis, do you remember years ago, or a couple years back, I should say, right, I guess before he vanished, we came to visit you, and we went fishing, and we did this and all this kind of stuff. He said, I believe Hunter would have been 3 at the time. He said, no, I don't remember that. And Hunter said, I do. And then Walt says, well, we've got, home movies, and they put it up on the screen. And the music accompanies it, and we see Jane for the first time. And we see how happy and loving this family that fell apart at one time was. And you see what it's doing to him to watch it. And you also watch the little boy kind of watching it, looking over at Travis, judging how this is hitting his father. Is it hitting him the same way it's hitting me? And when it's finally done, you sense the loss that's in Travis's life. He lost something that was beautiful in a way that's hard to even describe. Nastassja Kinski, she lights up a screen, and even in that kind of grainy footage of a home video, she's remarkable. It's hard to even believe somebody that beautiful, that fragile, that delicate can even exist in a world like this. And when it's over, Hunter goes, right before he's going, he tells Walt, calls him Dad, and then he leans in to Travis and actually says good night, Dad, to him as well. And later that night, Anne, who is Walt's wife, goes to Travis. And she says, I wasn't going to tell you this, and I'm betraying Jane's confidence in doing so. But we used to talk. And she would call and check on him, and then it just stopped. However, she set up an account. And on the 5th of every month, she wires money from Houston into that account. And he looks and he says, do you know what bank? And she said, I can get you the information on that. And it's at this point that Travis makes the decision he's going to go find her. And it's a scene with he and Hunter together where he tells her, I'm getting ready to leave. And Hunter, right before that, said, by the way, he asks, where were you gone all that time? And he says, Mexico. That's the first time we have any idea of where he has been, where he wandered out of, and where he wandered in. We don't know anything up until that moment. Doesn't give any further detail than Mexico. And he lets him know now, I'm going to go look for your mom. And Hunter looks at him and says, no, I want to go with you. He kind of sits and thinks about it, and then he acquiesces and says, okay, let's go. And Hunter is played so well by the boy in this film. It's Karen Black's son and Kit Carson's son as well. He plays this part so real. And he is cute because he's not trying to be cute. Not in that kind of Dakota Fanning way that we saw in I Am Sam and those kids that really chew the scenery. He's authentic in a film that demands authenticity. And when they get to Houston, Texas, he says, you over here, and they have these little walkie-talkies, and when you see your mom, you let me know. And finally, this little red car, red's a very big theme. The color of red is a theme in this film. It represents obsession and longing and love. She pulls up in that red car. Hunter spots her. He's going over the walkie-talkie to his dad. He's not hearing him, and then he wakes up, and then they kind of follow through traffic. And your heart is just like, right here, they're really going to connect her. They're really going to find her. They track her down. They kind of get behind her in traffic, get to this spot. He goes into this club and finds out this is a shady environment where she's working. And when he walks in, it's this eerie kind of music, and it's this sad, dimly lit environment. And you just look at it and you think, oh man, like who would work here? You know, it's weird to even think places like this exist. This is a sad, dingy, seedy environment. And he walks in, and you can kind of see the women, and you see her back. And he's kind of and then this guy comes in and goes, hey buddy, you're in the wrong spot. The women are downstairs. You're too early. Nobody's up here at this time. He goes downstairs, and then we realize this is one of those seedy / it's not a phone sex thing. It's not it's kind of a peep show. You walk into a room and they have a partition, and on the other side they have this kind of crudely decoration of either a hotel or a poolside or a coffee shop. And you basically get on the phone, call for a girl, and she'll just come in. She can't see you, but you can see her, and you talk, and that's what these men go in there for. And initially he gets the wrong woman. It's not Jane. And then Jane comes in. And he can't hardly even get words out when he sees her again. And he looks at her so longingly, because it's everything that he lost, and it's everything that sent him into a spiral. And then finally, he kind of gets the words out, and he starts asking her questions about what she does. I bet, do you go home? And there's a scene where she's kind of not understanding. She says, maybe it would help if I took my shirt. And the thing that's so beautiful, he said, no, please don't. Please don't do that. He can't stand to see someone he loves degrade themselves like that. He then asks, do you ever see people from here outside, on the outside? Do you ever go home with a client from here? She said, sir, they don't let us do that. And he goes, no, but I bet you would. And she said, sir, I don't think you understand. I might not be what you're looking for. He goes, no, please don't leave, please. And then she comes and sits back down and slowly says, look, I can just listen. I'm a good listener. It's fine. And he just puts the phone down and he walks out. And he goes and gets his son in the car, and they drive, and they go to this kind of desolate part of town, goes into this run-down sad bar, and he's drinking. And he's telling his son how the land he had in Paris, Texas, he had a dream that they as a family could live there. And then his son helps get him out of the bar across the street to this dingy, there's like a laundromat and these benches that he kind of sleeps it off on. And it's such an eerie scene. And as they're crossing the street, you see the street lights just flashing red, just like that. And it's empty, and the wind's blowing, and the trash is going everywhere. And then cut to the next morning, and they're driving, and they come up to the stop sign that says Houston, which is where she is, San Antonio. And his son looks at him and says, Dad, take a left. You know what you got to do. The very next scene, we see Travis talking into a recorder. And we realize this is a message for his son. We hear what he's saying. Telling him that he loves him more than life, but that they'll never see each other again. And why he has to do what he has to do. And it eventually cuts to showing Hunter holding this in his hand, listening to this, with the Houston skyline outside the window as this little boy's processing what's going on. He's been abandoned once again by someone who, in all fairness, maybe he never even should have forgiven. But his dad's kind of saying, I'm not leaving you. I'm freeing you from me. I'm a burden. In essence, I'm going to die so you can live. And then Travis arrives back at the same place he was where she works. Goes downstairs, gets in the room, And this time, the last time, it was some poolside place where they were talking, or excuse me, a motel. And the ambiance in this one, where she's behind the partition, is a coffee shop. She comes to the door and she's wearing this black outfit. And she sits down. He says, I'd like to tell you a story. Great. I love to listen. I'm good at that. I like stories. I got no problem. And then he stands up and takes the chair that he's sitting in and turns it around, knowing she can't see him, but he can't look at her when he tells her this. And he tells her the story of this couple and how this man found this woman whose beauty and essence and everything was otherworldly. There was something that was so good that it was almost painful to be around it. And how this man couldn't even enjoy it because his jealousy, his fear, his insecurities were crippling it. And it started to manifest in anger. He started to berate her. He started to ruin her. He couldn't accept that he had something so great. And earlier, as he's telling her about the good parts when he met this one, he says something that resonated with me. Every day with her was an adventure. Even going to the grocery store was an adventure in and of itself if I was with her. And it kind of goes back to how in life, our biggest blessings sometimes turn out to be our biggest burdens if we don't know how to appreciate them and handle them properly. And he slowly is giving her more and more about things that have happened and you start seeing it in Nastassja Kinski's eyes that she's processing this. And she's slowly like, well, that's not. And then when it hits, who's on the other side of that partition? And the tears come down. It's one of the most powerful moments in all of film. It's also one of the most intimate moments, and there's a partition between them. And then she sort of crawls to the glass, and then she turns the light off because she knows if she can do that, she might be able to see his face again. And she tells him that every man's voice is his. And even though she ran, she never got over him. And she never got over their son. She said, I love him in a way that words can't do justice. I almost had to quit thinking about it. I had to erase him from my mind because it was killing me. I told her to quit sending me pictures referring to Ann. I couldn't know about him anymore. I tried to blank it from my memory because it hurt so much. And she explains, I gave him away because I didn't want to use him to fill an emptiness that was inside of me. And he tells her he's at the hotel in Houston and he's waiting for you. And he gives her the location, the room number, everything. He's getting ready to leave. And then she asks him to stop. And then she turns around and explains to him what he means to her. And you see, these are two broken people who could love each other passionately, without boundaries, and endlessly. This had never ended. Even when he was gone, it was still there. He was still with her every day. But it couldn't work. They loved each other, and they were bad for each other. They were two broken people who would not become whole as one. If anything, they were too much alike. They would destroy each other. And they both seem to have come to this realization. However, Travis also sees that whatever issue she has, she's what Hunter needs. And he then leaves, and we see her go into that hotel room in Texas and have that first encounter with Hunter and slowly make her way across the room. He kind of walks up, and the way that they embrace and the way that she grabs him. It is so real. And then we see through that Harry Dean Travis is down there in the parking deck under the light watching, knowing that he has done what he came to do, what he was meant to do. He reunited something. However, it's something that he himself can't be a part of. He fixed the situation. He's far from being fixed. And then we see him driving in the car. And then the camera pulls out and we see the headlights and the city of Houston in the background. And it's like that. And it's one of those things, as I said, maybe I even should have waited before I did this because I'm so, it stirs me up every time. But angst, alienation, disillusionment, and the search for love, I think we can all identify. And if you can identify with that, I think it's impossible to not identify with this film. So please, give this film a chance. Watch this film. And if you've seen it, rewatch it like I do, because it'll be like seeing it all over again. Trust me. Until next time.